We're gathered for another sculpture forum, and this time we really are gathered in person in the gallery of Gwendoline Zurcher. We're here, I'm here with Brant Jumso, Jock Ireland, all being filmed by the wonderful RACHAEL BOHLANDER. We're here to talk about an exhibition of work by Tom Doyle. This is work that Tom made in Germany in 1964-65. He and his then wife, Eva Hesse, were in Germany at the invitation of a collector who had invited them there and given them a disused part of his factory to work in. It seems there were lots of bits of material and machinery lying around that Tom was able to repurpose in some of his sculptures. I'm delighted to see this work. I had no idea Tom had made these sculptures. They haven't been seen in America before. They've been crated and stored ever since they were returned from Germany, I guess, in the 60s. It is work that is open and colorful and playful, and, you know, connects me with what was happening in London in the 60s when I was working there. We're very grateful to Gwendoline Zurcher for allowing us into the gallery to discuss this in the presence of the actual works. Thank you, Gwendoline. Should note that this show is on until November 10th, so please try and get to see it. Jock.
Yeah, it's exciting because this is work that this is a young Tom Doyle, and the work of his that I'm familiar with is different.
Yeah.
And this, there's a kind of innocence about this, earnestness, but an American, a special kind of American innocence that it's kind of fun to try and relate to what was called the new generation in England. Yeah, that, and the work was done 63, 64, I think.
64, 65.
Oh, okay. Anyway, early 60s, not long after Marc de SUVERO appeared on the scene, and not long after Sidney GEIST wrote about Marc's, I think, his first show. And it brings back sort of memories of Sidney and of the excitement that surrounded HANKCHAMPION, that wooden piece of de SUVERO's.
Yeah, I mean, there was an excitement about sculpture at the time. I mean, there was an excitement that I think had been, particularly in London, had come back with Tony CARO when he came to America and changed the whole way he was working and inspired a whole bunch of young people, you know, about, you know, sculpture could be anything. Not everything is sculpture, but sculpture could be anything. You know. Brant.
I can't get over how idiosyncratic they are, how independent of the community he was part of and the people he was so close to. You really have this sense of a guy who was open to anything, and like this trip was
I think
a departure in so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, he has in an interview spoken about how liberating it was to be away from New York and away from the, you know, the kind of sense of having, I guess, you know, an expectation, I suppose, of himself, but also of a community of practitioners. to have that almost sort of isolation away from, you know,
And
away from
the
away from
artists
the
he
art
knew
world.
were working right over each other's shoulders. And
Sorry?
so the artists he knew were working right over each other's shoulders. So for that time, it was just, you know, he and Ava alone.
Yeah, 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 and it seems to have been important for her too. She did a lot of work on paper, I think, at that time.
And this funny thing of being collage and kind of improvisatory, the color is so good. And it has funny kind of echoes of contemporary painting and then ways of really going away on its own tangent as well. And yet so made.
Yes, so made. And one of the things that is quite surprising to me and quite different from anything going on in, or much going on in London at the time, is this extraordinary combination of materials.
But the thing I'm most struck by is how spatial they are.
Yes.
Really like an event in space more than any kind of object. And the madeness of them, like the carving where it's wood and the joinery of metal and wood, is really beautiful, but it's second to this crazy kind of sprawl that he achieves.
Yeah, I mean, the way they are, it kind of, you know, carefully fabricated, you know, at the same time really awkward.
And that gap between the wooden elements is so interesting.
Yeah, no, the spatial element of them is really, you know, what seems to be energizing them. I mean, they feel like birds.
Yeah. A thing that I think is really interesting that I don't recall from his work before or since is how sign-like some of them are. Like the green, yellow, black piece that has a base, which he was, you know, so dead against.
Well,
but it's like some kind of semaphore.
Somebody
like
signaling
railroad
something.
Signal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one moves. I mean, this spinning, turning piece got me thinking about the weather vanes up at the Museum of Folk Art now.
Yeah, you mentioned those.
Yeah, but the thing, a big difference between these and at least the original weather vanes is the weather vanes are way, you know, on top of the barn. You look up to see a weather vane. And, you know, the sort of mature work of Doyle is, even though they're big, they can be taller than you are, but there's very much a feeling of looking down. And it's interesting to, I mean, the engagement with space is for real. And here it seems he's excited about kind of breaking David Smith's rules, or not making the kind of flat two-dimensional sculpture. And so he's kicking in all 3 dimensions. But it's more than that, just this being 3, you know, he's thinking in space. And as I say, the mature work, its orientation in space is, it's not a strategy, or it carries meaning in.
And I mean, the contrast between the mature work and this work is in relation, my sense is in relation to gravity.
Yeah.
And the way in which this work is all kind of gravity defying in a way.
Right.
You feel it's about to fly.
Yeah.
Whereas the later work is very much about, you know, the earth pulling things down and its gentle ability to somehow or other lift itself up.
Yeah.
The tripod, that kind of 3-legged.
Yes, which a lot of this work begins to embrace.
Yeah.
I mean, this piece could easily be suspended. It's a funny support. I mean, a funny kind of base. That,
well, this one and the one over there
against
too both have a similar kind of stalk to get them up in the air.
Yeah. But it's a young guy, you know, exploring space in a kind of innocent way, and the mature guy is, you know, becomes engaged with gravity, with, you know, things that you.
that's an interesting observation.
Well.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's meaning. This isn't just a pretty sculpture.
And unlike CALDER, there's no menace, no evil spirit involved. It's outgoing and positive.
Well, yeah, it's American in a special sense.
In its optimism.
Yeah, and innocence.
But I think CALDER's evil is very American too.
Well, yeah, and it's hard for me to, you know, engage with a lot of that. You know, I think of the. I think the whatever it's called, the big show of portraits up at the Met now. That's not innocent work, and it's not American work up there.
Yeah, what I find about these works is that they're so. On the one hand, they're delightful, and you know, on the other hand, they are. I mean, there's no logic in them at all. You know, there is, and yet they're completely coherent. You know, it's a strange kind of, you know, how on earth?
Yeah, that's nice.
You know.
Yeah. And I've been trying to figure out, you know, why is that a curve? Why is that, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But Tim Scott has a way of thinking about space, and he says architectural space is about what the body does. You know, you can walk around in a room. But sculptural space is what the body is. And that, you know, there's no sort of, as you say, logic or structure that you find in architectural space. But you've got these weird things there, and all over the place. Why is that, you know?
Yeah. Given this, why this? You know, given
right.
that, why that?
But that's the way the body works.
Look at the little pieces in the back. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Well, I mean, they little pieces in the back precede by a long time CARO's table pieces.
Yeah.
And
there aren't strong premonitions of Doyle's later carving and assembly, but also of those sort of curving elliptical planes of CARO's that sort of lend themselves to collage and long movement, extended movement, and yeah. Really smart.
These smaller pieces are elegant, aren't they? In a way that the bigger pieces are. I don't say they're not elegant, but that's not a word I would use for them. It's intricate, isn't it? And yet somehow it doesn't feel fussy or, you know, or fiddly.
Yeah, it feels quick. It couldn't have been, but it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels as quick as constructivist sculpture can be. And to maintain that sort of spontaneity is...
Yeah, it's extraordinarily wonderful.
I like the state of preservation. I can't imagine if they were ever prettier than they are now, you know, with the grains showing in the wood and a little bit of chipping and wear and dust.
Yeah. Piece of metal on this end here just to secure that point.
They occasionally have like almost a aerodynamic metaphor. The swooping wooden elements are almost kind of nautical or aeronautical. But really working against any kind of totemic impulse that Smith embraced.
Very much so, yeah, very much so. No.
Or even landscape metaphors.
No, it's hard to know. I mean, other than in the case of some of them, I think, you know, bird-like quality, but I mean, it's very hard for me to get into his head, you know, what impulse was there to put these things together like this? What was already there? What did he find? Was all of this found? And he just attached it to that, and how would you come up with that? Looks to me like all of this was found. This is all...
Three found elements, yeah. It's funny, to the American eye, they're a little bit metric too. The nominal sizes, like they're not imperial.
Oh, yeah.
Not imperious or...
Imperial.
Yeah,
the English system.
Well, okay, what do you mean by that?
They're not foot and inches dimensions.
Okay,
You know,
okay. Yeah.
they're
presumably.
the diameter of that bar is like, it's a little different.
Yeah, it's not half an inch, it's something,
Yeah.
and that plate is not... but look at that. Yeah, that is thinner than that.
Yeah.
So that looks like it's bent, but it's not.
Yeah.
I think Doyle is the guy who really, when I think of like, and he's literally 20 years apart from Smith, when I think of a younger generation that Smith would feel sort of challenged or pursued by, I think of Doyle rather than like Judd and Andre.
No, I agree. No, they threw him out with the bathwater. Yeah, it's quite reminiscent of CARO's early work, in that sense of just suddenly finding a whole new language.
There's a swagger or whatever to CARO that is not here. That
I wouldn't say there was a swagger in the early CARO work.
Okay.
You think of that piece at MoMA, I've forgotten the title of it now, the yellow
thing going up in the air. Yeah.
That seems to me to be...
Yeah, and it's that sort of cobra yoga pose, just getting off the ground, that's close to Doyle's sort of... But still, that CARO piece is heavy. And Doyle's, there's a lightness. And CARO's coming out of brutalism and stuff. This is coming from America.
Yeah, I know. I think from what I've understood, I mean, Tom was quite invested in his Americanness. And when I met him, I found him to be extremely American in some strange, kind of hard to define way. But I'm not, I mean, can you articulate more about what it is about this work that you see as American? I see a clear difference between, although, there's a considerable overlap between what I'm familiar with in what was going on in London and this work. But I'm not sure that I understand that difference to be a difference between European and American temperament or thought or feeling.
Yeah, I don't know.
That strap hinge that the green form is joined to, that's a kind of like Midwestern sense of humor. He could have made that disappear, but there's something old-fashioned, almost nostalgic in the forging and the visible carriage bolts there. It came from somewhere that wasn't made for that piece. And then the fact that it's joined to that green element that's so 60s, I think there's a certain American, what would you call it? Like just folks kind of plain speaking funniness there.
Yeah, and he went to his school was the blacksmith, or say, as a little kid. He went to, he didn't go to St. Martin's. That is something academic or whatever about, or CARO. CARO did great things in schools, but there's a learnedness that Doyle resists.
Yeah, I hear that, but there's also, on one hand, we've spoken about the care with which these things are obviously made, with painstaking in some way, although at the same time, they are not cautious; they're almost reckless.
Yeah, right. Sure.
There's a kind of sense of absolute abandonment of any kind of sense of rules.
Right. And I read somewhere, to be a sculptor in America is to be crazy, or, to be... there is no play, and Doyle was proud of that, or, he... he liked that sort of outside, or my sense of things is that he was happy with that outsider sense of things.
I've said elsewhere that one of the distinctions I find between practitioners here and European practitioners is the relationship to tradition, and the way in which so many American artists, sculptors in particular, I think, have a self-conscious relationship to tradition that Europeans don't have.
But what I'm trying to say is that they were a bunch of Americans on 8th Street, not all over the place, but a bunch of them who talked, and, there was a community, is the word we use now, I guess.
But there was nobody in America in 63, 64, 65 making work like this.
Well, the SUVERO emerged in, that's... I don't understand that.
You don't understand? I can't think of an American artist who's working like this at that time.
Well, not exactly like this.
Well, James, give me some.
No, I agree. Not like this. Not this combination. Like there's Smith and Stankiewicz notably working with found steel elements, but not this way, and not combining it with these fabricated, swooping wood elements this way.
And not using color.
And not using space like this.
Not using space and not using color.
Yeah, but I mean, Sidney's work is very different from this. But it's using wood, it's using color, this is part of, it's a part of, minimalism and all that stuff has kind of swamped this territory. Yeah. And we're not familiar with all that was going on. But, Sidney was older than Doyle, but it's the same world.
No, it isn't.
Well, I mean...
no, it isn't.
Sidney, I mean, we're in the same world here. Yeah, we're very different people.
We're in the same world, but I mean, Sidney's head was, I mean, Sidney was a scholar, and his head was with Brancusi, and his work is very different in spirit to this.
Well,
something lithic and monolithic. And,
but it's full of color. He made some constructed things. There's... and I'm sure that Doyle looked to Sidney as an older guy and drew on his thinking. Certainly Sidney loved Doyle.
Well, that may be true, but it doesn't mean Doyle loved Sidney. I mean, it's not reciprocal necessarily. And I don't...
I'm...
Well, as a person, as an influence, yes, I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't...
But in terms of the work...
I think you're arguing with me.
Sidney's work is tame compared to this.
Well, only...
in comparison. I'm not saying Sidney's work is essentially tame, but in comparison to this, it is tame.
But this is wild in its Americanness. It's not wild in its sort of careless, chaotic kind of wildness. And it's that American wildness that Sidney shares with Doyle. And that attachment to America and freedom and all of that kind of stuff is, it's American and it's connected to Doyle.
You know what's interesting about that Americanness? It feels, I'm asking myself, like, how do these pieces respond to Europe? I don't really see it, although I see like metric elements in the found element, in the found pieces, things like that. But I think it was like a kind of sabbatical. Like he landed there and his workspace was a kind of island, like maybe he's meeting European artists and stuff, but he didn't go there to confront them.
Right, sure.
He used that time to, carry forth something of his own.
Yeah, he was happy to be an American. There was no, in a way that we kind of have forgotten.
There's a certain
an innocence,
a pre-Vietnam debacle.
Yeah.
Eye of the storm kind of innocence. Time is running out, but,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're right, because I can't get my head around this stuff. I mean, something like this is just so... I could never make something like that. I mean, it is so lacking in anything that I recognize, and yet it's wonderful. I mean, I wish I could be that kind of irresponsible,
Well, but there's a responsibility for this to stand up,
I know, and the responsibility for some kind of coherence.
Yeah.
But arrived at without any, it seems, underlying premise. The coherence is arrived at somehow or other. I don't know how.
Yeah, yeah.
Without an underlying kind of sense of the rules of the game.
Right. Well, right. And he's making toys for little kids in his village, and he's working in the blacksmith's office. But that's America, as opposed to St. Martin's. You know, the school, the artist's statement, and all that kind of stuff. He's free of that.
In this one, I could see something old world, new world, in that the found steel elements that are all that robin's egg blue are kind of tangled and staggering, you know, kind of chaotic. And then they support these things that sort of, as they swoop upward, become kind of lighter, freer, you know, have a certain kind of dancing fluency. You know, the two things contradict each other. And the colors are, again, they're complementary and kind of the supported elements kind of argue with the support in color. I wonder what Calder thought of these. I mean, he must have been aware of them.
No, I don't think Calder would have seen them. He may have seen photographs.
Because once they came here, they were...
No, I understand from Gwynoldy that they remained in their crates and that Tom never revisited them. Apparently didn't keep photographs of them around. I mean, he put them behind him.
It's amazing.
I think that is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, you know, it's very surprising that somehow or other the presence of this work must have lingered with him, but he never actually. At the same time, the freedom that he was experiencing in Germany. He seems to have not been able to sustain that feeling when he came back to America, and this in some way kind of is paradoxical if you're saying that this is essentially an American spirit in some way, you know, because it seemed to be something that he was able to experience away from America. And not to sustain when he returned.
Well,
it took other shapes, took other forms when he's back. Yeah, I mean, I see clear premonitions of the timber work and echoes of the work in stone before.
I agree. I mean, of course.
But it does feel like
it's
something
all connected, but
put away.
But it does.
After that, I mean, it is crazy that they were invisible after that, and that I mean, I guess not even other artists saw them.
No,
you know, like at its place.
Why were they? Why was they not shown when he came back to America? You know.
Well, it's.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is continuous.
Yeah, no, and I can see, you know, I don't want to disagree with you in the sense that not suggesting there's an absence of continuity in his work before or after this period in Germany. But there is something, I think, quite distinctive about this work that I think is absent from his work before and absent from his work after. That's not a value judgment, it's just a statement of a kind of spirit that is going on in these works, which was not present before and not present after, and you know, is worth, I think, kind of like making a note of.
Yeah, well, I think that's what this show is doing for me, is I'm seeing this stuff in my memories of the, whatever you want to call them, timber pieces, the mature work. Because those things are, you know, they're twisting and turning and,
Yeah.
you know, sort of just like this. Or,
Yeah.
Let's call it the later work, not the mature work.
Fine, yeah.
Because that would imply that this work is immature. You know.
Well, but it is a young guy's work. That I think that has to be.
I'll go along with that. There's something youthful about this work, you know, that is youthful, but I mean, it's so quirky. It's so odd. It's not idealistic. It's not.
It's pretty idealistic to me.
Is it?
Yeah, he believes in sculpture.
Yes, and in the possibility of joy.
Yeah.
Which seems not to be what his later work is about.
Right.
So, well, I think we've done it here. I just think this is an eye-opening show. It should be seen, and I think it's absolutely a revelation to me. I'm so glad to see it. Okay, very good. Thank you, guys.